Recording in progress. Very nice. This is no one's actually here on Zoom. This is mostly for me to get the AI notes afterwards. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Happy 5th of July. America 250. Baruch Hashem. Country's still going. We'll see how it is after the next few elections. But in the meantime, everyone's always been saying that. It's one of the things I'm old enough to remember. Pretty much every single election that I've ever been alive for, everyone was always saying, like, this is the last election we're ever having. If you don't vote like this, the country's going to end. And now here we are, 30 years later, and the country's still here. So everything's up to Hashem. We have to just pray. And as the rabbis tell us, that the heart of the king is in the hands of Hashem. These great leaders, they don't really have free will at this point. At least not for what they choose to do for the nations of the world. Their own personal lives, of course, they have free will. But in terms of what's going on for the nations of the world, God's got a plan and they're just a tool. So, not entirely unrelated. Today we want to talk a little bit about anti-Semitism. I actually been thinking a lot about this over the past couple of years, and I realized that you really have to break it down more. People talk about anti-Semitism, but there's multiple flavors of anti-Semitism. And I also want to distinguish between anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism, which are also not the same. So let's make a few definitions, and then we'll explore a little bit. Right? Anti-Semitism, first of all, it's a made-up word. Mm-hmm. The word itself was only invented in 1869. Yeah. Say it again?
So that itself is anti-Semitic.
Sure, the word itself is anti-Semitic. The word was invented by a German, which sounds hysterical, but it's true, by a German Jew hater named Wilhelm Marr in 1869, if I remember correctly. Because at that time, the whole idea of races, as we understand that term now, is only a couple of hundred years old, right? If you look at writings of people throughout the ages, they used the word race, but they used it differently, right? It was much more of like a combination of people and religion and nation. Like the idea of there being like kind of a scientific, quote unquote, ethnic race really is only coming out of the 1800s. And so while this was getting a lot of traction and people were starting to think about it, I remember reading, I found somewhere printed like a copy of one of the old books on race from the 1800s. Mm-hmm. And they originally divided between three big human races, and everyone was supposed to be a subdivision, right? They called them the Caucasian race. They called the Mongoloid and the Negroid. Like that was the terms they used back then, right? Mm. I said, that's it. So you basically had your white people, your Asian people, and your black people. That's essential. They, of course, have discovered since then that if race is even a thing, it's a lot more complex than that. I just find it funny that they thought, right, that white people come from the Caucasus Mountains originally. At that point, that's what they called the Caucasians. Mm-hmm. So I'd say the Gorsky Jews. I say you're the real white Jews, the real Caucasians. I mean, you're Caucasian, literally. So is it? But so
does that work?
Like Persian, though.
I don't even
Descended from Persians.
The Gorskys.
Yeah.
So are we like really Mizrahi, all of us, because we all come from Africa? We just didn't stay in the region.
Well, that, by the way, that's also debated very heavily.
I believe it's the Africa.
It's also debated very heavily. There was an idea in human development that there was a concept in human development for a few decades that human beings originated in East Africa and then spread throughout the world. But there are many scientists who have debated that. They don't think that's not 100% accepted by any stretch of the imagination anymore. It was when I was a kid, when I was at least in public school, when I was growing up, like everybody said human beings came out of Africa. But now people argue on it a lot. Anyway, so why did I bring this up? Because while this whole race thing was becoming a thing in the popular world, in the scientific world, so some Jew haters, specifically this guy Wilhelm Marr, he's the one who was famous, he said, why do we hate the Jews? What's the racial component of hating the Jews? What race are the Jews, right? And so he invented this word, Semite. Mm. And the word Semite comes from the Bible, comes from the Torah. Mm. It comes from Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Yafes in Hebrew. So the name Shem became in English Sem. Mm. So Semite means the descendants of Shem, the son of Noah. So that's how I always joke. I said it's anti-Semitism. You're welcome to use that one. Now it's true that according to Jewish thought, according to Torah thought, we do come from Shem. We are descendants of Shem, the son of Noah. But we're not the only ones, right? We have many Middle Eastern peoples. It reminds me, Yasser Arafat, may he burn in hell. He was once interviewed. I remember this very, very clearly. This is decades ago, obviously. He's been dead for a couple of decades, definitely decades ago. He was once asked by a reporter, like, many people accuse you of being an anti-Semite. And he tried to say, how can I be an anti-Semite? I myself am a Semite, right? Which is, of course, entirely missing the point on purpose, obviously.
Right.
No one has ever thought of anti-Semitism as hating Syrians, Assyrians, Arabs, or any of the different peoples of Middle Eastern heritage, right? Anti-Semitism, since 1869, the word was invented specifically for the hatred of Jews. By the way, since we're on the topic, there's a whole bunch of words that were invented or changed drastically because of Jew hatred. The most famous one is the word Holocaust. The word Holocaust, if you look in the dictionary, just means a very large fire.
Doesn't it mean offering?
No.
Interesting.
It could be that there would be a very large fire when giving an offering, so maybe it was sometimes related. But like you have, for example, there was a very, very famous fire in Chicago in the 1800s that like burned half the city down. It was called in the newspapers a Holocaust in the late 1800s. Nobody thought it meant anything to do with killing anybody or genocide. There's another word. Genocide was invented during World War II, but the word genocide was invented by a Jew who escaped from Poland, got to Europe, and he got to England, I should say. Poland's part of Europe. He got to England, he escaped, and he said there's no word to describe what's happening to the Jewish people in Europe right now. So he took the word geno, which means a people, like the genome, and side, which means to kill, like homicide, etc., combined them together, genocide, to kill a people. It doesn't mean the Jews are the only people that have ever suffered from genocide. I'm not saying that, but the term itself was invented because of the Jews in the 1940s. Oh, that was already going on. No. In history, there has always, it wasn't thought of in terms of racial or ethnic cleansing. It's not the terms they would have used because they didn't use terms like race or ethnicity. Those are modern terms. But if you take a look, I'm a student of warfare. I studied military history, which really means I just studied history because humanity's been fighting itself for all of history. There's no time in our history where there hasn't been wars, essentially. So one of the things that I saw this again, I was looking into it more deeply. If you look at the way that ancient peoples fought, I'll tell you why I was looking at it, because I was learning these parshas and learning about the Jewish wars against the Midianites. And it says in the parsha, it says that Moshe and the Jewish people were commanded to attack the nation of Midian because they had tried to destroy us. So now we're getting revenge. And it said like kill every male. Like there's like no boys are allowed to survive, literally, including children. Complete male annihilation. And even the girls, only young girls who were not mature, so had not been with men, they were let to survive, but any older women were also wiped out. So it's in the Torah. So I'm like, okay, part of learning Torah and trying to understand a little bit. And one of the commentaries I was reading was saying, it's extremely difficult for us. Thank God, it's a good thing that for most people in the civilized world today, this is a very challenging thing to understand. But for most human beings in history, including billions of people today, if you would show them this, they'd go, yeah, obviously. We have a different mentality compared to not only most people in human history, but compared to many people today, right? So the fact that we're bothered, this is not today's topic. This is the topic of genocide. Maybe we should have a class on it, right? But
how to?
Yeah, no. No. Don't get me in trouble. No, there is the topic. We should recognize that the fact that our people and those that have been influenced by our Torah, meaning Western civilization, for the past couple of centuries, we're the ones that have been absolutely astonished and flabbergasted by the idea of genocide or ethnic cleansing or complete annihilation and warfare. That was the norm throughout human history. Look what the Romans did to, the Carthaginians, or what anyone did to anyone ever. Either you completely enslaved them, made them a vassal state, so they paid you money, right, to complete servitude, or you utterly annihilated them because, so that they wouldn't be a danger later, and then you could take over their land and put your people there to populate it. Okay, that's not today's topic. Although maybe this is how we get my topics nowadays. I go, okay, what do you guys want to talk about next time? Genocide. Okay.
Question.
Yeah, of course.
But is it limiting all kinds of like war and stuff like that? Doesn't it in a way ruin us humans as a species? Because then the survival of the fittest doesn't really like turn out, and then like the people who wouldn't really survive and get to like create stuff.
Even from a purely Darwinian, if you believe in that kind of stuff,
Gets rid of the weaker.
nah, that's not true. All it does is get rid of the ones who lost.
But
Right. That's not necessarily true. You can have great nations and great armies that still lose because of bad luck or an enemy. One general has a superior tactic, right? That you could have the whole. In fact, you can have a ethnically healthy, balanced, wealthy civilization that's destroyed by barbarians. Doesn't make the barbarians in any way superior. They got lucky, or they got bribed to let in. Like the Great Wall of China never worked once, right? Because every time the Mongols came to attack, they just bribed the guards and went through. Right. So, right, are you gonna say that the Mongol hordes were superior to Imperial China? It's hard to, depending on where you're coming from, but I think from many angles, very hard to make that argument. Okay. So anyway, we're not Darwinians here. We believe in God. Okay. At least for the sake of the class. I'm not telling anyone what to believe, but at least for the sake of the discussion. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So the idea of a racial hatred for Jewish people in a modern sense is very modern, right? And that particular type of hate, we're going to call that one flavor of anti-Semitism. We're going to call it racial anti-Semitism. People say we hate the Jews because they're an inferior race or they're an evil race, whatever it is. This concept is very modern and very illogical. Because even sitting in this room right now, we have, well, what race are we? We have different skin tones, different types of hair. You see Jews who have Jufros, right? And then you have Jews who have long, straight hair, right? You have light-skinned Jews, you have dark-skinned Jews. You have blue-eyed Jews, right? And you have brown. You got blue eyes, right? Yeah.
You have area
I thought you did for some reason. Right, yeah, right. Some of you guys have like very nice light color. Oh, here we go. I got the Aryan Jew right next to me, right here. My oldest son, who's turning 23, when he was little, he had bright blue eyes and platinum blonde hair, right? My wife and I have brown eyes, brown hair. We're like, what's going on over here, right? So it happens to be we both have family members that have those genes. So somehow my son got the lottery. My Aryan son.
Had a Jufro when he was a kid.
And there you go. None of my kids ever did, but anyway, so like the whole idea of a Jewish race in modern terms doesn't make any sense at all, because Jews come from all types. But you go to Israel and just go down Yerushalayim or Tel Aviv or Haifa or Yaffo, anywhere, and just look at all the different Jews walking by. There are all different kinds. Half the Jewish population of Israel are Sephardim. Right? And Sephardim themselves come in all different flavors. You ever see some of the Syrians who look like Aryans also? Right? There's a couple of those, right? Some Moroccans also. And then you get some Yemenites that are like darker than this tablecloth. Right? Like we have all different kinds. So the whole racial idea doesn't really make a lot of sense. Mostly, if anyone is using race as a part of it, it's mostly an excuse. But there are some real parts of anti-Semitism, so try to understand those. The racial part doesn't make any sense. And there's also, I started to mention, there's also anti-Judaism. Okay, so let's distinguish between those two things. You can be both. You can be both anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. But the difference is anti-Judaism is anti the religion, right? Anti the Torah, anti its beliefs. There are people, for example, that don't hate Jews as individuals, but they hate the beliefs, they hate the religion, right? And they'll tell you like, oh, what do you mean? Like I have This is a pretty common one, but like, I'm not racist. I have black friends. Same thing with Jews. Like, I'm not anti-Semitic. Like, I have Jewish people I work with, and I love them. They're very nice people, and I don't hate the state of Israel or anything like that.
So I wanted to ask. So I see online. I don't know. I have a very messed up feed right now, but I see a lot of anti-Semitic content, and a lot of it doesn't make sense.
It's gotten more in
No,
recent
but
years.
a lot of the
Yeah.
anti-Judaism content
Yeah.
is not true and doesn't make
Right.
sense. So does it make it anti-Judaism
Yeah.
or anti-Semitic? Since
Good.
bullshit?
It's very often overlaps. I'm not trying to say you have to be one or the other. Generally speaking, most people today are either both, or they're just anti-Semitic because they don't really know enough about Judaism anyway.
They combine everything in one thing. They say that.
They tend to combine them.
Yeah, they say that rabbis in Britain.
So let me try to explain. Let me try to explain a little bit where it's coming from. You had a question?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, like, there's a lot of anti-Semites who think that all of the, communist ideologies that we have today, like in universities, like in all this propaganda, like liberalism, transgenderism, it's all
from the Jews.
I don't think so.
Yeah, like, and it makes no sense.
Okay.
Like, they think that this is our beliefs, like they think that this is our religion, when it's like couldn't be further from the truth. It's
So,
like
so this is a very good place to focus in a little bit because I do want to answer the misinformation. Misinformation is one of those.
There's so much.
Okay, let me. I'm trying to answer. Like, I want you to imagine somebody sits at my Shabbos table and says, "Oh, did you hear what those Koreans do?" I was like, "No, what do they do?" He says, "Koreans on Friday night, they go down to their basement and they sacrifice cats to their demon god. And then they put runes and the blood on the walls, and then they pray for the destruction of Christians." Right? Now, is that misinformation? Yeah, obviously. But what would 99% of us be like? Like, get out of here. What are you talking about? That's crazy. I never heard anything about Koreans doing that. Like, I don't
say that about a Jew.
Exactly. That's my point. It's not enough to just blame misinformation. There seems to be a very fertile ground for people to believe anything bad about a Jew, right? It's not like they're sitting there like a blank slate. They feel nothing about Jews. Did you hear Jews kill Jesus? What? I hate them all. Like, it does. That's not how it works with Jews. So misinformation is not enough. It's true, but it's not. It's not a sufficient answer for anti-Semitism or anti-Judaism at all, because there's very clearly already. I'll give you a parallel example, right? When Hitler took over Germany, a lot of people like to say that Hitler created anti-Semitism in Germany. It's absurd. No. First of all, if you know anything about German history, there was an enormous amount of anti-Semitism going on in Germany already for centuries, right? The founder of Protestantism, and we're going to come back to that because Christianity has a big part of it. The founder of Protestantism, Martin Luther, he wrote, I'm not really sure what we're going to do to Jews, and maybe we're going to have to burn them all. Right? He wrote that in like the 1500s. Right? It's not like the Germans just one day decided. It's not like Hitler got up one day and spun the wheel. In Living Color. I don't know if you remember, if you guys ever heard of Living Color. It was a very, very funny show in the 90s. It's how Jim Carrey got his start. The Wayans brothers, very, very funny guys. So they had a skit where they had like the wheel of racism, and they would spin the wheel. Which race are we going to mock today? And it was like black people, Chinese people, whatever, and the whole thing was like white people, white people, white people, white people, white people. Like it was obviously a skit, it was very funny. But the whole thing with Jews is exactly that, right? It's not like Hitler got there and said we need to blame somebody for Germany's problems. Well, who am I going to blame? So you spin the wheel, and it happened to hit the Jews. No, people are ready. There is fertile ground. So where is that fertile ground for hatred of the Jews coming from? So one of the big, I'm sorry? Okay, we'll come back to that. So one of the biggest places is from the Christian church. Right? The Christian church for thousands of years. Now here's where you have to make the distinction. You have to be careful, because many people in the church who wrote badly about Jews never met a Jew. And a lot of what they were saying was coming not as an attack. It wasn't intended as being anti-Semitic. It was intended as being anti-Jewish. But it very, very often, people today who are anti-Semites like Candace Owens, famously, and people of her ilk. Oh, I got to use the word ilk, right? They will quote early church fathers. Hold on, I found a whole bunch of them just to be able to show you. Where is it? Here it is. Here's just a few examples of early church fathers. A guy named John Chrysostom. He wrote 8 homilies against the Jews between the years 386 and 387. And he writes, the synagogue is worse than a brothel and a drinking shop. It is a den of scoundrels, a temple of demons, the cavern of devils, a criminal assembly of assassins of Christ. I hate the Jews because they violate the law. It is the duty of all Christians to hate the Jews. That's just one quote. Here's Justin Martyr, right? Jews are neither wise nor prudent, but crafty and unscrupulous, wise only to do evil. Here's Tertullian. Jews forsook God for idolatry and thus lost favor. Their present national ruin proves their sin. And then the Origen, Augustine, and it goes on and on and on. You feel free to look up whatever early people that are basically started the Catholic Church and are considered to be the intellectual and religious fathers of Christianity, wrote terribly about the Torah, about Judaism, and about the Jewish people.
Voltaire also said some things.
Well, Voltaire's a lot later. Voltaire's only a few hundred years ago, right? But Voltaire is different, right? Because Voltaire is already Enlightenment, secular anti-Semitism. We're not up to that yet. Right now, we're dealing with like a Jewish, with a religious anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. We're starting with the religious aspect. We'll come to the Voltaire, and the secular anti-Semites will have to come later, obviously. Now, we see this in Islam and no different. The Quran and the Hadiths in many places talk about the Jewish people. Now, it's true. Some people like to say, what do you mean? The Jewish people are called the people of the book, and we have to give them, respect. It's all propaganda. If you actually look at how they were taught in Islam to be treated and how they were actually treated, people like to say that Jews were treated much better under Muslim rule than they were under Christian rule. I mean, yeah, it's like I like to say, would you rather get a knife in your eye or a club to your nuts? Like which one would you prefer? Like they're both really terrible, and it'd be hard to make a choice in the moment. Sorry if that's too crude for the ladies present. My apologies. Right, but it's like how do you compare? There were pogroms and murders and second-class citizenry and extortionary taxing. Jews are treated terribly by the Muslims in almost every place and every time for 1,000 years, right? To say that it was better than Christians, maybe, depending where. Some places the Christians treated us great, right? When the Polish first, those of us who did the Poland trip know this, right? When the Polish king first invited Jews into Poland, like almost 1,000 years ago, the Polish people treated us very nicely for a while. Right. And that happened in a lot of places. There were German principalities in the 13, 14, 1500s that invited Jews in. And they were like, yeah, Jews are great. We love you. Right. And then became very successful and people got jealous, et cetera, et cetera. And then they stole our money or kicked us out or killed us or blah, blah, blah. It's a repeating pattern for Jews again and again and again. So the ground is already like been plowed and ready for hatred of the Jewish people for 2,000 years. By Christianity and by Islam. Now, does that mean that there aren't any there aren't any Christians or Muslims that were actually quite nice to the Jews? Of course, there's always some. But if you have, like, let's say a priest or a nun or whoever, and they speak nicely about the Jewish people, they're not doing it because of Christianity. They're doing it in spite of Christianity. Right? They're going against what their original leaders said. They have to find excuses. They didn't mean it. It's only because of the circumstances of the time. They were competing. They have to come up with an excuse. They can't find Christian or Muslim sources to treat the Jews well, right? They have to go against their sources.
What about the evangelists? Because they say that, like, it says if anyone curses Israel will be cursed. So that's why they try to treat us good.
Yeah. So in other words, what they do is they ignore Christian teachings and they go back to the Old Testament. In other words, they go back to the Torah.
But that's part of their religion.
Okay, but they have to therefore ignore everything that came later.
Yeah.
So when was Christian Zionism then invented? Is it
relatively recently? Yeah. Last
I know
couple,
like the boom is relatively recent,
Christian,
but you would think
Christian
that-
Zionism came along the same time as Jewish Zionism, right? There were plenty of Christians. They've really grown up a lot since the founding of the state of Israel. It expanded quite a bit for obvious reasons, right? And the past couple of decades in America with many of the evangelical Christians. So evangelical Christians are I love them. They're the best. They love the Jews. They help the Jews. But I want to tell you something. They're perfect to prove one of the points I wanted to make. Evangelical Christians are not at all anti-Semites, but they are anti-Judaism. They're anti-Judaism. Now, how do you know? Because ask any one of them, what's going to happen to Judaism and Jewish teachings at the end of days? They're going to say, well, of course it's going to disappear. Of course, Jesus is going to come, and all the Jews are going to accept him, and all the Jews are going to become Christians.
Right.
The very core of their belief. Now, don't get me wrong. I much prefer them than Candace Owens' flavor of Catholics. You know, like I'm not even mad at them. I'm not mad at them at all. But I used to say years ago, I used to say that they're all anti-Semites. That was before I more clearly distinguished between anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism in my head. They're not. They could love Jews. They could love the state. They're not anti-Zionists. They're not anti-Semites. They could love Jews. They could help Jews. But their fundamental religious beliefs is that our religion will eventually die and theirs will take over.
they believe we're kind of like a tool in their
I don't know. I'm not going to pretend I know every detail of what they say. But even like if you ask, sit down. If you have an evangelical Christian friend and you put a shot on him and say I mean a vodka, right? So he's like a little open. You go, what's going to happen to all the Jews in the end of the days? He's going to say, oh, of course they're all going to accept Jesus. Right? That's a complete destruction of Torah and Judaism, and they believe it's going to happen. Now they don't look at it as a bad thing. They look at it as a good thing, and they're saying, look. We love the Jews because Jesus was a Jew. So, yeah, but you don't love Jesus because he was a Jew. You love Jesus because he was Jesus. You love him because he's the founder of your beliefs. Not that he was actually, but you believe that he's the center of it. You believe that he's God or Son of God or a combination of those things. You don't love him because he was Jewish. If he wasn't Jewish, you would say, oh, we love. If Jesus was a Muslim, you would say, we love him. We love Muslims. Jesus was a Muslim. There's nothing to do with what he was. It has the reason they love him is because of what he is to them. Anyway, again, I'm great with them. I love them. I will be very happy with them. No problem. Because, to me, they're the perfect Christians in that sense. Because one day when Mashiach actually comes and we're going to ask him what your name is, and he's either going to say Jesus or Menachem. And then all the Jews are going to go, whoops, we were wrong. Or all the Christians are going to go, whoops, we were wrong. And then we're all going to be friends anyway. So what's the problem? It's like the famous joke. When Mashiach comes, all you have to do is ask him, were you here before? Right? It's not, we have no problem with that.
Imagine we get a Bob or something instead.
The thing is, like, even if it is a Jesus, like,
Right.
there's still no guarantee it's going to be a new covenant.
Yes. I'm just joking.
Like,
I'm just joking.
But that's the thing. Their whole thing is that there's a new covenant, and that's why we don't have to listen to the Old Testament.
That's right,
But
that's
if
right.
Jesus was an observant Jew, he comes back, he's gonna be like, oh.
And
Jews.
listen, part of the problem is that Christian sources are very, very contradictory, right? They have 4 different gospels that completely argue with each other in different areas. Like in one of the gospels, Jesus says, what's the English translation? Not one jot or tittle of this law shall be erased. Jot and tittle are the fancy English words for the dot on top of the I and the cross of the T. So in modern terms, it would be dotting the I and crossing the T. In other words, not even the tiniest detail of Torah will ever go away. Is quoted something that he said in one of I'm not an expert in the Christian books. So if you want to look up which one of those he said it in, but I have very clear memory, that's one of the things that he said.
He
But
also said to keep the
keep Shabbos. He also said that Gentiles are dogs, right? and I'm only here for the Jews. But so it's very, very complex.
He actually said that?
Yeah.
They have it in the Bible?
In
Yeah.
the New Testament, yeah.
Why don't Christians, they don't-
So Catholics don't read the New Testament.
Yeah.
It's only Protestants and like evangelicals.
So look, you have to understand like for example, this whole class is not all about Christianity. We're going to go past this in a second. But the guy who actually is the most important man in Christianity, which is Paul, he writes in one of his letters, he wrote a bunch of letters. Most of the New Testament basically is his letters. And one of the letters that he writes, he says, to this group, I'm like this, but to this group, I'm like that. And to the third group, I'm like this. I'm whatever needs to be for people to accept Jesus. He was willing to put on different masks for different people all the times. And you can tell because he has different tones. Like he says letter, like Galatians means what? His letter to the Galatians. Hebrews is what? His letter to the Hebrews. Romans is what? His letter to the Romans. Every one of his books that he wrote was letters he wrote to those people trying to convince him of this truth. And he writes differently to each of them.
He has a letter to Hebrew.
Yeah, one of
Good.
I'm not going to
No?
pretend to be an expert in it now.
We're the Jews. We should read.
But
We should read. What did he write to us?
the thing about Paul is like he never actually met Jesus though. Like
Yes, also true.
Left him on red, man.
Also What, you're going to write every letter someone wrote to the Jews in history? Okay, not every letter, but this guy's pretty famous. All right, fine. So step one of what I wanted to kind of solidify is that a lot of the hatred for Jewish people, historically speaking, it's not coming out of a vacuum, right? It is coming out of whether it's just anti-Torah, anti-Judaism, or as I mentioned to you, as I quoted to you, many of the church fathers very much hated Jews as well as people, right? It was a mixture. Now, one of my favorite things, so that's anti-Judaism. Now I want to come and focus on anti-Semitism specifically for a few minutes. I think one of the most important things to distinguish, if you're at work, you're at school, you have family, you have friends, and one of the most common things that comes up is people will say, like, anti-Semitism is just an excuse Jews use to get away with everything. Right? Like everything is anti-Semitism. Whatever. Anytime somebody criticizes a Jew, there are other Jews who get up and say anti-Semitism. Now, to be fair, there are some Jews who do that, and I disagree with them entirely. I think there are very few of them who actually do that.
I think that's a straw man argument, to be honest.
I believe it is a straw man argument, but there is, meaning there's a tiny amount of truth to it.
No, there is.
Right? But it's not what most Jews do. Most Jews do not cry anti-Semitism every time. Like if somebody walks in front of the synagogue, with their boombox playing loud music, then anti-Semite. Not everyone.
There's so much actual anti-Semitism. Anytime like a Jew is doing something and someone attacks them for it,
Right.
then it's like we want them to be more sensitive. Can you like give us a break? Like,
Sure.
Sure. Like, not appropriate anti-Semitism.
But you have to recognize that that's a very emotional argument, not an intellectual one.
Sure.
Right. So what I want to do now, and I'm not saying you're wrong at all. I actually agree with you completely. I think that our people have been attacked so much. Can you understand why we're a little sensitive? Like the fact, if you can't understand why Jews are sensitive to attacks on Jews, then you either are utterly ignorant of Jewish history or you're yourself an anti-Semite.
Just like he's very easily accused.
Sure.
Like, yes, there might be a technical definition or whatever, but it's like, do you know who you're talking to?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you have to understand that the anti-Semites who accuse Jews of anti-Semitism of genocide, they're doing it specifically. It's an attack on us as a people, not just on the state of Israel. They're saying, "Oh, you who survived Hitler should know better than anyone else not to become the new Nazis." Right? That's based on they're trying to destroy us morally. They're trying to destroy us spiritually.
And often the same people who say that that Israel is doing the genocide, often they're the same people who are saying that no way it was 6 million.
Sure.
Yeah, often it's the same.
So both of you are bringing up one of the points I wanted to bring up. So good. So let's segue into that exactly. So one of my favorite thinkers in the Jewish world in the past few decades is a Russian refusenik named Natan Sharansky. If you haven't read his books, he's brilliant. And Sharansky, one of the things that he talks about, which I like very much, it's a very nice tool to think about this. He says, of course, to criticize the state of Israel, and I'm adding, he doesn't write this because he's talking in terms of the state of Israel, but I'll add to criticize Jews in general, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with criticizing anyone. If you see a human being, or you see a nation, or you see an organization that is acting in a way that you believe to be immoral or unethical or evil, just because they're Jewish doesn't mean you're not. So what? You're not allowed to say anything? Of course, you're allowed to say something. That's. If you try to say you're not allowed to criticize the state of Israel, Jews, or Jewish organizations, you're feeding into anti-Semites' statements because that's one of the things that they're claiming that we're saying. We're not saying that. Sharansky says, and I agree with him completely. What we're saying is you have to be able to distinguish between legitimate criticism and anti-Semitic criticism. What's the difference? How can you tell the difference? I'm gonna give you his definition, and then I'll put it in a nutshell because you have to have like a one-word answer for people. The definition is he calls them sometimes he says three, sometimes four. I use three. He says there are three D's, right? Three-letter D's, right? The first one is um, dehumanization, sometimes also called demonization. It's the same idea.
Mm.
If Jews or Jewish organization or the state of Israel is called specially and uniquely demonic, evil, or inhuman, right? That's not a criticism. Like when I gave the example of, oh, you know what all Koreans do? They slaughter cats onto fires and they put runes of, and they sacrifice and they pray for the destruction of Christians. Like that's that's very demonic. It's very devilish. You're thinking of and very historical of both Christians and Muslims and secular. Interesting, even secular atheistic like Voltaire, who associate Jews with demons and devils, even though they themselves don't. They say don't believe in demons and devils because the imagery is so powerful. So when you're using the imagery or verbiage, the lexicon, the language of either demonic or like subhuman, like when the Nazis said, "We're not even human. We're rodents or we're viruses or germs." So you're not human. You're dehumanizing. So when you dehumanize or demonize, 100% automatically that is not legitimate criticism of anyone, not just Jews. We're talking about Jews, but anyone. I don't care if you talk about races like that. You want to call white people unhuman or subhuman, like many black racists do today. They call whites demons, white devils, right? Right? Many black racists use that term.
No.
That's just as illegitimate for whites as it is for Jews, right? And the same thing, you have a Ku Klux Klan guy who calls blacks, I don't even want to say, right? Whatever terrible things they say, that's dehumanizing, right? That's also not legitimate criticism of blacks. But we get it all the time, right? It happens to us all the time. So if your friend says, well, how come you're saying you're not allowed to criticize Jews or Israel or Jewish organization? You say, of course you are. But if the criticism calls the Jewish people inhuman or demonic, that's not criticism, that's anti-Semitism, automatically. I don't even need to know what they're saying. But which is terrible, because it might even be, let's really give the devil his due, to quote my guy daddy, Dr. Peterson, right? Let's even give the devil his due. Maybe they're even bringing up a legitimate problem. But if they're putting it in the language of demonization or dehumanization, it's anti-Semitism. Because how is it, if I'm a demon, how do I do tshuva? How do I repent? How do I stop? If I'm a rodent, how do I become human? You're just removing any possibility of this people ever being redeemed. It's impossible.
Mm.
So if you're removing any possibility of redemption, of repentance, of fixing the problem, then that's not criticism. The only answer, you know what you do to rodents? You exterminate them. You know what you do to demons? You exorcise them with an O, not an E, right? Exorcise. No. Like you destroy them. You annihilate them. That's the only thing that subhumans or demons. The only thing you do with them is you destroy them. So if you're using language of demonic or subhuman to Jews, that means you're saying, I believe the only response to this is a final solution. So goodbye. That's not legitimate. Second thing, second D, is double standard. And this is what we brought up a little bit before. Is it okay for Israel, the state of Israel, to commit genocide? Of course not. That's terrible. There's no moral, ethical, historical legitimacy for genocide under any circumstances. Although it was the norm through all of human history, as we said before. But certainly we all agree today that it is morally, ethically, religiously wrong. Hold on, let me finish the point, then I'll take your hand. Right, so you say, okay, is what the Jews are doing in Gaza, of course, is the most common example in recent couple of years, is what the Jews are doing, is that genocide in any way, shape, or form compared to any genocide in human history? And it's very clearly 100 different ways not. That doesn't mean they're not making any mistakes. That doesn't even mean that there aren't some Jewish soldiers or generals or politicians that are, let's give it devil's due. Is it possible that the conduct of the IDF in Gaza is not perfect or sterling, that maybe they've done some terrible things? Of course that's possible.
That's kind of common in every war, though.
And that's part of the double standard, right? First of all, it happens everywhere. But even if we say, but no, the Jews should be better, fine. Jews should be better. And what does the state of Israel do again and again and again? Just a few weeks ago, right? They had some Jews that defaced some Christian monuments, right, or something. Do you remember this? Not long ago, like less than a month ago.
It was in Lebanon?
Of the Holy Mary.
Was in Lebanon?
I think it was in Lebanon.
And what did the IDF and the state of Israel do? Is they took those soldiers and they immediately pulled them back and they said what's going on and they condemned it, publicly condemned it, right? You ever see any Muslim army that was destroying religious artifacts of other religions that the Muslim nation condemned its army for doing that? No, right?
No one expects them to condemn it.
That's how far off we are morally. They don't even expect the condemnation.
It's also bigotry.
Like, that's what we're here for.
It's also bigotry. It's also bigotry of low expectations. Like, oh, what do you expect from them? You know,
Maybe. I don't.
In a liberal's eyes, it's like decolonization.
Bigotry of low expectations. I think it depends. I actually like the idea of bigotry of low expectations, but I think with the flip side of it is for Jews is that it's the anti-Semitism of unreasonably high expectations, right? That the fact that we Jews are expected to. This is what's so funny is the very same anti-Semites will call us demons and devils, but then they'll say we should not be doing genocide. Well, hold on. If you're calling us demons and devils, then isn't this what you're expecting us to do? Isn't this what is norm for people like us to be doing? So you can't simultaneously tell us that we're demons and devils, but also say we should be acting better in Gaza. That doesn't make sense. So the double standard is it's unfair on a level that is gross and it's grotesque. If you compare any nation in history, is the idea perfect? Obviously not. No group of human beings is perfect. But I think it is clear that the amount the IDF has done to prevent civilian casualties of a population that hates us and supports the murder of us is beyond what any military has done in human history, and it's not even close. So it's a double unfairness. Not only are not doing a genocide, we're doing the least genocidal of any military in history in a population, and we're being accused of genocide. It's a double standard on the grotesque level. So therefore, immediately you see, it's anti-Semitism. It's not good criticism. And you had a point to make.
I was going to say, like, how is it a genocide if Arabs and Muslims live in Israel?
Not just that, but even in Gaza, the population grew.
Yeah, it's like.
Have you ever heard of apartheid or genocide where the population grows?
No.
About every single attack.
Right. They send leaflets.
Yeah.
And what does Hamas do when they see the leaflets? They specifically put their women and children in the place where the bombs are going to go.
And they could part of the establishment of the state of Israel, so genocide would never happen against the Jews. If this was a genocide, the entire world did nothing about it. It means that if the role was reversed, nobody would save them. Nobody would protect them.
We're not expecting them to. Yeah, we only Hashem will protect them. Okay, so the last is we did demonization or dehumanization. That's the same one, double standard, and the third one is hold on, my mind is blanking for a second. No.
That was out of that was totally out of nowhere.
Please, ladies, use the testosterone. That's kind of the demonization part. That's demonization. So we already covered that one. Yeah. It's sorry, hold on. It's demonization, it's double standard, and it's
Is it delegitimization?
Thank you. I couldn't remember the word. So delegitimization is very specific for the state of Israel because it's saying that the state of Israel is not a legitimate state. Right. That's anytime somebody, for example, I just saw the other day when Mamdani was in the New York mayoral debates. One of the questions he was asked, I just saw this literally yesterday, just after Shabbos, it came up on one of my feeds. It's like they asked him, "Do you believe that Israel has the right to be a Jewish state?" Right? And he says, "I believe that Israel has the right to exist." And everyone's like, "But do you believe it has the right to be a Jewish state?" I believe Israel has the right to defend itself. Right? Like he does not believe that Israel is legitimate as a Jewish state. There are over 100 Muslim or Christian states in the world today. Officially, by their constitution, by their laws, they're a Christian state or a Muslim state. Over 100 altogether between the two, right? Israel is the only one Jewish state. You're saying the Jews are the only people in the world that are not allowed to have an official state? It's a delegitimate. Just an example. You're saying your state's not legitimate. It could be a democracy. Everyone should be able to vote. If Israel was a pure democracy where everyone was around to vote, it would be destroyed within 20 years.
A lot of people are saying it's like they don't want states, like or something like they're trying to say.
Okay, well, fine. But Jews are not an ethnicity. That just goes back to our racism.
No, but I mean like based off of. You're right. There's so many others, but I guess.
First of all, there's plenty of ethnostates,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Japan.
Like is Saudi Arabia is all Arab. And all Muslim.
He said in like a recent thing, like he included Saudi Arabia on the list. Like he said the same thing. Israel and Saudi Arabia both not be.
Should both not be. Yeah, sure. Of course. Because no one's ever going to do anything about Saudi Arabia, right? Anyway, all right. So this is important just to clearly be able to know next time you're at work or at school, you see someone on the train or you see a feed in your Facebook, whatever, and you want to answer it. It doesn't take long. Just really quickly ask yourself, is this really anti-Semitism or is it legitimate criticism? Because somebody could be upset, somebody could be using even pretty vile language, and it's not anti-Semitism, right? Just because someone's being a jerk doesn't mean they're an anti-Semite. It happens to be, from what I've seen, purely anecdotal, it's probably 90% anti-Semitism, maybe more, right? But not 100%. So if you desire, I'm not saying that you have to, you do you, but if you desire to be really, really like honest about it, because maybe one person will see your honesty and be affected by it, then you have to say, here's what makes it anti-Semitism specifically. It's not the claims you're making, it is the nature, it's the way you're making the claim. That's what makes it anti-Semitic. Now, it could also be the claims you're making, because if the claims you're making are in their very nature demonic, dehumanizing, or double standard, right? But I'm saying okay, let's use a real life example, right? If we take a look at a guy like Harvey Weinstein or Epstein or Bernie Madoff, right? They're Jews, right? Is what they did when people said that Epstein had kids on his island, is that an anti-Semitic claim? No, of course not. But if they say he did it because he's a Jew, that's anti-Semitic, right?
Right.
It happens with all the Jews who leave Judaism do these.
And even if
It's
it's
enough that it gets people's attention. The problem is that all the way back already in the 1970s, I think one of the New York Times editors said like Jews is news, right? Like if you want to sell newspapers, one of the best ways is to say something that Jews did, which is funny, right? Because we make up 0.25% of the entire world's population, less than 2% of America's population. But we're that, and that's fine, right? That's already that's a prophecy in the Torah.
50-50, honestly.
Either we did it or we didn't.
Because it's like there are non-Jews. There's only two types of humans.
Which, by the way, is also really funny. Like I don't know how many different people is there a word for them and a word for everyone else? It could be that there's others that have that. Right. Well, infidel is a religious term, right? Right. Yeah. Jews and Goyim.
And the Goyim.
Yeah, but they don't have a word for it. We could just say non-Jews.
Do
We have a word, Gentile.
They say infidel.
Infidel.
Yeah, but
They're
infidel.
all infidels.
Infidel means somebody who doesn't believe in Islam.
But
right?
they did say
Yeah.
it could be throat of anyone who's not a Muslim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody who's not Muslim is not them, and everybody.
Oh, I just
Was like that.
if you've never seen Jeff Dunham, the ventriloquist, and his Ahmad the Dead Terrorist, it's worth. I was watching again before I was going to sleep. I should have been going to sleep earlier, but instead I was watching Ahmad the Dead Terrorist. It's very, very funny. He everyone knows Ahmad the Dead Terrorist.
Yeah.
He performed in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
So he's up there
Oh, yeah.
with whatever, and you gotta watch this. You gotta watch it. And his puppet, the terrorist, he's like, yeah. So why are there so many Jews? And its whole Israeli audience is like laughing. Yeah, he's like, well, we're in Israel. He goes, very good. Okay. I think maybe one last little bit on anti-Semitism in particular. So, because it did come up, I want to come back to it. So we have secular anti-Semitism, right? You have people who are, at least they say they are atheists and secular. They have nothing to do with religion, and yet they hate the Jews. So I think that really shows that, the idea for Jews that rabbis have been saying for many years is that a Jew who leaves Torah um, it's like a flower that's been cut from the earth. The flower is still alive. It's still beautiful and smells nice for a few days, right? And so when you cut, secularism comes from religion. Right? So when you cut the religious roots, but the flower's still alive for a couple of days, right? They still, so that could, there are many, many things that grow out of this. I'm talking about the anti-Semitic part of it, right? It's not just like if someone grows up a Christian their whole life and all of a sudden says, "I'm now an atheist," and goes, "And now I love the Jews." Right? That's not a usual. That's not a thing that has happened historically, right? They still grew up with all of those prejudices and all of those hatreds. So look, there are examples like John.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Relate to what you're saying. A lot of these like secular atheists, a lot of their real grievances are against Christianity, but they don't differentiate
They don't
Christianity from
differentiate.
Jews. They think, oh, it's the same thing. So the real like resentment is really
Just
toward
hating- they were just
Christianity. A lot of them just really like hate specifically monotheistic like
So, like
religions.
one of the most famous atheistic thinkers and debaters today, Richard Dawkins. So he was debated on British TV by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory. And if you haven't watched the debate, it's worth watching because Rabbi Sacks is amazing. He was
They said he could pass away before bad things happen.
yeah, he passed away during COVID.
On the election night.
Huh.
On election night.
So Rabbi Sacks, he was debating with Richard Dawkins, and at one point he said to him, he says, Richard, this great English accent. He says, Richard, your problem is that you're not a Jewish anti-Semite. You're not a Jewish atheist. You're a Christian atheist. He said, like one of my rabbis said. He said if you talk to most atheists and you're both being honest, you'll say most of the problems that you have with religion, so do we.
Yeah.
Right? It's the things that you believe are problematic. We also believe are problematic, and Judaism, when done properly, doesn't deal with those problems. Okay, Hashem should protect us to not be harmed by anti-Semites. Should give us the strength, the courage, the ability, and the faith to be able to get past. God willing, it's only a phase,
Amen.
and
Amen.
Mashiach will come soon, and then all anti-Semites will be like, "Whoops."
I mean,
Amen.
Yeah.
The temple's gonna fall in the sky. It'll be like